Welcome, 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 my lovely brothers and sisters. Welcome to another book, live book reading. And today, as you can see, we are doing two chapters. One is a small chapter I can do in just 20 minutes, I think. And then we start with a second chapter. The first chapter is all about the Great Awakening, and the second chapter, which I will begin and will do in two parts, is known as the Singularity and Human 4.0, Part 1. As you can see, I have included a cover picture from the book I am reading from. This book is in actuality the second volume that I'm reading from. I highly recommend you to buy this book, the Orion book, part 1 and 2, written by Wes Penry. What I say, I am reading from volume 2 right now. And buy these books yourselves, start reading it for yourself, and see how many information this book contains. Go to the websites, also the websites of Wes Penry himself, and dive into the archives of information that he has, videos as well as free PDFs. Dive into this. You can also go to the Baruch Haba Bashem Yahuwah.net website. There you can find a web page completely dedicated to Wes Penry and his work, videos and books. So please do so. Inform yourselves, educate yourselves, because we do not know what these fallen archangels and fallen angels and archons and the elite and the oligarchs have in mind for the coming period. We do not know for how long we are still able to have the internet. So while it is still available, please use it wisely and start just educating yourselves. It is more than ever from a great importance that we educate ourselves, that we read informational books from informational human sources that has done a lot of research for many of us and has dedicated a huge amount of their life and energy and time in helping the rest of us to get the information so that we can make our conclusions, and based on that we can then make our decisions in what timeline do you want to go into. And are you staying in the timeline that we are now more and more pushed into or not? So let us start with the first chapter. This is chapter 20 from the Orion book, volume 2, written by Wes Penry. All right, the so-called Great Awakening. And this is a movement, as we shall see, and there is a sinister meaning and plan behind it. As usual, I would say, because we live in a prison planet, and so the prison wardens do not have our best intentions at all. The Great Awakening, the toxic woke culture. We know we live in a world that is completely insane, but the worst insanity right in our faces as of this writing is probably the entire woke culture. Of course, it is, as usual, run by the elite to create more division, more anger, more hate, more anxiety, breaking of boundaries, um, enforced thinking, confused children, horrendous child abuse, and horrendous child abuse is the um, gender change on children, indoctrination of children, a confusion of sexes, spreading and announcing, announcing narcissism, sociopathy, and psychopathy, malignant narcissism, and Machiavellism, and also antisocial personality disorders. Um, and also preparation for the singularity. So the entire woke movement is created deliberately to bring as much as possible human souls into the singularity timeline. And then he says, did I forget something? All right. The woke culture is more than 100 years old. I repeat, the woke culture is more than 100 years old. And if we go back in time, especially around about the 1800s, and so on, we can already see this whole transgenderism that is being played out. So yeah, he is correct in this. This is something Spirit told me also. But it started out to address racial prejudice. However, today it is a completely different beast. I am tired of stating the obvious as if I was talking to idiots, but it is required unless I want to have the thought police breathing in my neck. Here is a statement once and for all, and I quote this statement. Quote, I have nothing against homosexual people, transgenders, or any other form of genders people might prefer, and I never did. That is not the issue. People in a free will universe may experience whatever they want, and sometimes that includes a change in genders. That is a person's individual right to experience, and it is none of my business. The problem is when this is forced upon me and the rest of the world, even using the law to make people accept a very aggressive propaganda and enforcement machine to agree to imbecile pronouns and force transhumanism on our children. How dare you? Most transgenders think this is just as disgusting as I do. More power to them. All right, this was a statement from Wes Penry himself. What to me is astonishing is the fact that the elite treat us regular humans as stupid one-cell organisms. Now more so than ever. How dare they put such nonsense in our faces, forcing us to accept this evil insanity because it's evil, which must be the worst insult in my life. Yes, I am upset about this because of the enforcement and the false, evil, dark, and sinister agenda behind it. And what I see in almost all these woke enablers is high level narcissism, I mean, sociopathy and psychopathy, and antisocial personality disorders, i.e., psychopathy. But if I step back and disregard my upsets, I see how this fits right into the agenda of the Singularity timeline and is a part of preparing for the singularity. When sexes, between brackets, genders, become obsolete. Yeah, because if people have become cyborgs, uh, gender doesn't matter anymore. We, the adults, are forced to endure this nonsense, but the kids, better said children, do not always have the luxury of distinguishing because their minds are not yet fully developed. Exactly. They are like sponges. And when woke transgender people come to schools and show themselves naked to 10-year-old students to educate them that there are more than two genders, promoting transhumanism in children, the insanity is off the chart. And when so-called experts suggest that all children need a sexual partner, whether it is another child or an adult, then that is the end of society. Then we are dealing with the end of society, and this is exactly what is going on. We see a total collapse of society. And this total collapse of society has a meaning to push as much as possible human souls into this singularity agenda slash timeline. There was a tweet on this recently claiming the United Nations declared this, comma, but it was so-called fake news. Yes, sure. Yet it was not entirely fake news at all, because an agenda to sexualize children is not a misnomer. There were psychologists suggesting this decades and decades and decades ago. Back then, they wanted to make it lawful for daddy to masturbate his daughter. After all, daddy is the daughter's first love, was the motivation. How sick can you be? I am not making this up. It was turned down then because the world was saner. But it will come up on the table again soon, I am sure. Soon the world, after a little more indoctrination, might be ripe enough to accept such an acceptance. If the so-called experts say it is good for the child, then so it must be true. Because, yeah, the majority of humans are still prevailing the advice of so-called experts far more valuable than their own self-thinking. All right, long-term effects of transgender surgeries. So I heard from Professor Sam Vaken that there are no long-term studies on the effects of a transgender operation. No, and this counts for each and every agenda. There is no study about all these effects of all these agendas that are now being rolled out. It is not that it hasn't been attempted, but the studies needed to stop because the subject was, here it comes, too sensitive. And the researchers got attacked. Yes, of course they got attacked because the establishment, these elite people, and thus the hidden hand. Who is the hidden hand? The fallen archangels and the fallen angels and the archons and all others who have no best interest with the human soul group whatsoever. They don't like to have the truth out. So, of course, they attack these researchers that are truly and sincerely care about the effects of transgender surgeries. So the researchers got attacked. Of course, surgeries of this kind are nothing new. So there are people who have lived many years in the opposite gender from what they were born with. This means that there are unofficial records on long-term health effects that are not being made public. According to this professor Sam Vakin, any long-term health effects from such surgeries are not entered into the patient's medical records. It makes me wonder whether doctors tell their patients about the effects of taking lifelong hormones. Most of us know that a person who needs more testosterone or estrogen is usually warned about potential consequences, such as significantly increased cancer risks. Still, such people usually only take these hormones for a short time, up to a few years. So what will happen if a person 20 years old takes heavy-duty hormones for the rest of their life after a transgender operation? I would assume by using logical thinking, this will increase the cancer risk exponentially. There are some studies, however, showing a libido decrease in people who have gone through gender surgery. This can show already after a couple of years, sometimes even earlier. I have seen personal testimonies online from unhappy transgenders crying in the videos who wanted to explore sexuality from the perspective of whom they consider themselves to be, but the decrease in libido prevented them. Were they told this before surgery? No, they weren't. However, there are apparently potential remedies for such a decrease, and that is more medicine, which is not a remedy at all. It could be very well that patients are informed, but their urge to go through it anyways may be stronger than the risks, creating a form of dissociation process. So the reason I bring this up is that there are interviews on the internet with transgenders who were not told about serious side effects before surgery. These people, understandably, were not thrilled when these effects started to show. Not all transgenders lose their libido. However, some also report that their libido increases. The most important reason for the entire woke culture. This ongoing woke culture obviously is not a grassroots movement. It started high in the echelons of power, and ultimately it is an overlord agenda. Whom are the overlords? The calm kings. The group of fallen archangels and fallen angels and archons and everyone that is participating them. You can see that as a gigantic group of overlords whom themselves have become, many of them, by the way, become cyborgs themselves already. So as listed in the beginning of this chapter, the woke movement has had many consequences on society. None of them benign if you read the list, but some consequences are more important than others for the elite. In the 1970s, David Rockefeller funded Women's Lib. Dot to split up the family unit, and that has continued ever since. The Rockefeller Foundation has been investing in women's empowerment since the first wave of feminism in the 1970s, when it, along with other large foundations such as the Carnegie and Ford Foundations, began funding women's studies programs in universities and other efforts to research and address women's equality. Better said, this whole program, this whole plan was already based, and in actuality, it goes back before the 1970s because we already can see this feministic movement uh, at the mid 1800s when they already started to um, bring this in, but it was slowly done. And in the years 1930, we saw far more emancipated women, especially, of course, in Hollywood, because Hollywood is and has also become the promoter of the feministic agenda. The original feministic agenda, from what I came to understand, is fabricated by the Fabian Society. And if you look at the logo of the Fabian Society, it has a wolf in sheep clothing. So that says quite a lot. So this whole feministic movement, in actuality, goes far more back in time. The woke culture removes societal values and morals on sex and genders. It is primarily directed toward the very young, who will grow up in this kind of society. Of course, the elite and the overlords have always targeted children when they want to introduce something new, because then they can manipulate an entire generation at once. Of course, because children can then manipulate their parents with it. So that's how it works. Instead of trying to manipulate the adult population, which is much harder because they have experience. As Professor Sam Vacken put it, they are trying to deliberately create a chaotic society, and this is what we see. So these elite groups of people, oligarchs and higher up, whom are working for all these fallen archangels and fallen angels and archons, and thus the overlords, they are deliberately creating a chaotic society. So all the chaos that we see is deliberately created. There's a purpose with it. So according to Sam Vacken, they are trying to create a chaotic society without standards. Chaos makes sure that there are no rules, and just one rule, and that is the survival rule. Then order can be established on the elite's terms. So here you go. They create a problem. The elite people are creating deliberately chaos uh, havoc, mayhem, and then they're sitting, leaning backwards in their fat ass chairs and waiting till the public, the people, are coming to them for a solution. And of course, it will be a solution in the elites and thus in the overlords' benefit. So then order can be established on the elite's terms, and the singularity will be rung in as a solution to all the upheaval. To expand on that, in schools these days, the teachers are not allowed to correct bullies, so abusive kids can torture their peers without interference from adults, teachers in this case. Thus, they are defending the bullies by omission, letting other children be traumatized and neglected. The last thing the school system wants is educated children. Dr. Jordan Peterson made case in point when he tried to implement a working school system that created interested students who increased their results with 35%. This was not interesting to the school system, of course not, because the Rockefeller Foundations, the Rockefeller family, as well as the Rothschild family, already said in the beginning 1900s that they do not want to have intelligent human beings, but they are searching for worker bees, a downgraded human species that does not question anything, does not have creative abilities anymore, but are just worker bees. This is what they want. Which according to Dr. Peterson's research is based on a system more than 100 years old, which purpose was to create obedient soldiers and workers who were clever enough to follow a scheduled routine in a work environment. Since then, nothing has changed. The woke movement helps to desexualize society. The woke movement also helps to dehumanize society, forcing this movement on children, so they grow up with a distorted view of sex, genders, and pronouns. They may no longer call their peer he or she, but must ask their classmates what pronouns they prefer today because it might not be the same as yesterday. You see the ridiculousness here and the level of confusion that is deliberately created in the minds of our children. And so our children are completely becoming more and more confused. And thus, the level of fragmentation in the mind becomes more. This has now become a mandatory rule in many schools, and if the students do not abide to this, they are punished and can lead to expulsion. You are not allowed to call someone he or she. But the worst thing is that many parents accept this something potentially good, good, which is not good at all. What has the world come to? Yeah, indeed. Why is it that so many parents are still refusing to do homeschooling? Why is it that so many parents are still sending their children to these loose fabrics? Yeah, to these loose collecting institutions called school. All individual thinking is thrown out of the window. It is shown in IQ studies that the average IQ in the general population has sadly decreased. substantially over the last couple of decades. This is very concerning, brothers and sisters, that this is happening. They are degrading us humans, and it is happening quickly now. Pushing and promoting transgenderism on children is the most vicious, violent, and evil and dark thing on their public agenda right now. All right, and with this said, I have come to the end of reading chapter 20. I am now going into chapter 21, and I will do the first half of this chapter because it is a long chapter. Let me see. Uh, yeah, I will do the first part, which will be 9 pages. Chapter 21 of the Orion Book, Volume 2, written by Wes Penry. The Singularity and Human 4.0. All humans are already cyborgs. This is an interesting opening of this chapter. For a few decades now, we in the alternative community have discussed a future where the elite plan to put our consciousness in cyborg bodies, i.e. bodies that are partially biological and partially machine, made with nanotechnology. Lovely brothers and sisters, many of us have no clue that we are already inhaling a lot of nanobots. They are spraying this in the air. They add this to the food because what is being sprayed in the air will land on the soil through the rain. So everything is already contaminated with nanobots. In actuality, it is already in us and around us. We also see that many people have done studies on clothing, and it seems that many clothing today are loaded with nanobots. And there is a new movement going on, which is the wearables and the Fitbits and wearable clothing. For example, I have seen sort of ponchos with technology interwoven. And if you have it cold, you can use that poncho. You can push a button, and then your poncho becomes a sort of central heating poncho because of the technology that is in it. So our clothing shall, in near future, not be normal clothing anymore and shall be loaded with nanotechnology. So we need to wake up. We need to see what is truly going on with this world and in this world. We need to see that we humans are terraforming our Earth into a planet that goes more and more toward desert, because we humans are terraforming our Earth, our planet Earth, into a world of complete death. And we are already in it. Everything is already depleting. This agenda upset people because many humans want to remain biological beings. However, that is not the actual issue, believe it or not. Bluntly speaking, we already are cyborgs, and we have been cyborgs since Homo sapiens sapiens were created in the beginning of the Matrix, nearly 10,000 years ago. Our physical bodies, genetically modified by Enki and Isis, also known as Nin.Ma, later involving Marduk and Ereshkigal, are biotechnological machines. This means we are already AI to a significant degree. Our bodies are programmed to accomplish certain automatic tasks, such as breathing, regulating heartbeats, and to self heal. This and so much more is something the body can do without the direct and sentient involvement of our consciousness. The body just needs the battery necessary to trigger these functions. And the battery is the consciousness. We invest in this half machine we call our body. As a part of our sapiens body package also comes an artificial soul and mind, as discussed in a previous chapter. This artificial soul is in actuality what Wes Penry also describes the astral body. That is the artificial soul and mind, as discussed in previous chapter. So thus the issue is not whether they will force us into a new cyborg, it is about why this is being done. People who want to stay in the matrix welcome the fact that nanotechnology will extend their physical lives, potentially for a very long time. Some would call it so-called forever. Although this is an elusive word, in fact, forever in this case is just a short period, since the overlords are planning to invade Orion. The new cyborg bodies, which we may coin Human 4.0, will only last as long as it takes for the invaders to conquer Orion. Taking into consideration that they would succeed, of course. But even if they won't succeed and will be defeated, Orion will terminate the 4.0 bodies anyways, because when humans trapped in metaverse are free to leave the matrix, the human 4.0 bodies become completely obsolete. Human 4.0, the bodies built with nanotechnology, will function as batteries, keeping metaverse running. Astral bodies, as we know them, together with the between lives area, which is a section in the matrix universe, so to say, where they also have the recycle operation of souls. In actuality, the soul recycling happens on the moon. And this between lives area will also be obsolete, and the 3-unit conscious will instead be trapped directly inside a metaverse avatar, which will be the new artificial soul, mind, and body. And know that this artificial soul, mind, and body has no forms of empathy, lacks love, lacks creativity, lacks self-thinking. Stuck within a fourth construct inside a new grid, and this fourth construct has already been created, encompassing the infamous so-called cloud where all metaverse consciousness will be assembled. So all those people whom are using AI chatbots and whatever and are using chat GPT for having their questions answered, these foolish people do not know that they are tapping into this cloud that is completely filled with all the knowledge um, collected by humans themselves. So um, it is not that this cloud is creating answers all by itself. No, these answers that you get from a chat GPT, the information, the answer on your question was already there. Yeah. So people are saying, oh, yeah, chat GPT confirmed my idea on this and that question. No, you do not want to see that you, in actuality, were finding information that you yourself, in actuality, have stored into the cloud. That is why they have created social platforms. They are gathering all the information from these social platforms and they store it into this cloud. So now you get the understanding of the whole cloud. And this cloud is the new, this cloud shall function in near future as the hive mind. People need to wake up. Where all metaverse consciousness will be assembled. Metaverse and the singularity. Why now? Why has Enki waited so long to lure us into the metaverse? And know that Enki is also another name for Lucifer slash this fallen archangel Uriel. Why not at the beginning of the matrix? There are several reasons for this. The obvious reason is he needed to create Homo sapiens sapiens first. So the human soul group could go through evolution again after having suffered complete amnesia in the early matrix. Yeah, we are having amnesia. They brought us in deliberate amnesia. So that is why we constantly have to start all over again. Another reason goes hand in hand with that. The overlords must manipulate us to such a degree that we enter the nanoverse willingly and with consent. We must have adjusted to the overlord's mindset and copied it. This is what narcissism means. Narcissism means also, and what the overlords have done, they have pulled the majority of the human souls more and more into their mindset, which is called shared fantasy. And through this shared fantasy, the majority of us humans started to develop their agendas here in this world. Not what we want, but what these overlords want and have for us in mind. We are developing a destiny that the overlords have in mind for us. Better said, what this schizophrenic God the Father of this matrix world, known as Yaldabaoth, has in mind for us humans. Because those whom are worshiping God, they need to wake up to the fact that they are not worshiping God at all. They are worshiping Yaldabaoth, a very dark, sinister being who is very narcissistic, schizophrenic, sociopathic, and psychopathic. We must have adjusted to the overlord's mindset and copied it. Well, this is exactly what is going on in a rapid pace right now and what we see unfolding since the last 3 decades. It took them almost 10,000 years to do so, which is, for in their opinion, not that much of time. Now, humankind is close to being ripe enough to be lured in, but perhaps not right enough. But not, sorry, but perhaps not ripe enough. Not yet, because there are too much critical thinkers still walking around. From what I have learned, the overlords are desperate to get the metaverse up and running because of the ultimatum. Yes, the overlords want war, but on their terms. So, lovely brothers and sisters, you need to wake up to the fact that you are being used as cannon fodder for these overlords and their war plans against Orion. Do you want to participate in that war plan? I don't. So that is why I am bringing this information to you, and that is why I'm saying and advising you to read this book yourselves too. They want to avoid extended war in the Earth's vicinity because they feel vulnerable here. They would not win if Orion set in their forces, and they know that. Their only chance is to write our avatars. So we need to wake up and make sure that they don't have the amount of avatars that they need to go on war against Orion. Why then does Orion not attack them now instead of waiting? Again, it is because of many things, such as keeping humankind as hostages. But there is another reason that has not been discussed as much. So let us discuss this reason right now. All right, patents and genetic tinkering of our DNA. The human scientific community has betrayed their own species. I repeat this again because this is very important to understand. The human scientific community has betrayed their own species in a much more severe manner than previously thought, often unbeknownst to them. We all know that they have received technology from the false gods, so they can genetically manipulate and tinker with our DNA and mRNA. The vaccines are a typical example of this, but there is, of course, the entire nanotechnological aspect of remodeling us into human 4.0. But here is the big issue. The overlords have manipulated the science community to take patents on genetic tinkering. Our patent laws work in such a way that because these patents have been approved, the overlords now consider themselves owning the new species 4.0. So now we get the deeper understanding of this sinister agenda behind patents and patenting things because it gives them ownership. Yeah, and all those people who say it's my body and I have the right over it, you need to think right now. The new humans become the overlord's property. In extension, own us. It is because we were already hybridized when they created different seed lines long ago. See chapter 1 for this. This is illegal from a cosmic perspective. So it's illegal what they are doing. They are claiming us, they are possessing us, they think they have ownership over us, and they do this in illegal ways. And this is illegal from a cosmic perspective. So the overlords need to justify that, particularly now when they might get caught and put to trial. Well, these overlords will be put to trial eventually. Thus, by patenting tinkering of DNA, we humans approve of genetic manipulation. And because the overlords are the ones doing it, it now becomes so-called legal since we have given our consent to it. And and with this we also have given consent of DNA tinkering of animals. Yeah? The overlords can then claim us as theirs. Do you want to be claimed by a bunch of fallen archangels? Do you want to be claimed by a bunch of fallen angels? Do you want to be claimed by a bunch of archontic beings? I don't. So the overlords can then claim us as theirs without breaking universal laws, because this is an agreement between the Khan kings and the science community. It is legally binding, so if Orion interferes, they break human laws and commit a crime against the human legal system. There are so many patents that are approved behind our backs, but because a patent is a legal thing, it is not allowed legally to break it. Therefore, this is another reason why the Queen's forces cannot just come. So they need to wait for another scenario, which is the depletion of this matrix. So let us go. Contradictory population control versus increase. Most of us have heard of the Georgia Guidestones and population control. Now, we also know that since several years ago, these Guidestones have been fallen down. The elite, have deliberately collapsed these Georgia Guidestones. So when this collapse happened, you can say that in actuality, something changed. Yeah. They want to reduce the population significantly. How come then that the population has been increasing out of control, so to speak, over the last few decades? Why wasn't this population increase stopped in its cradle by the overlords? I have seen no satisfactory explanations for this and how it is going to be done. So let us see if we still can solve that riddle. I have learned that out of the 7-8 billion people on the planet, the overlords most likely only need 3%, which is approximately 192 million people, for their purpose of invading Orion. Still, that is quite an army. Therefore, if over 192 million people will join Metaverse and will be so foolish and stupid to join a cosmic galactic warfare and be part of that, there are only so many 3-unit consciousness people the overlords can handle. After all, the so-called gods are much fewer in numbers than the human soul group is, and each overlord needs to write an avatar. The rest will be cannon fodder, possibly sent to the front line to protect the possessed humans farther back in the line up. So there is a boundary for how many people they need. The rest they don't care for. They also do not want too many non-possessed humans to take part in the final battle because it can easily get out of control and work in Orion's favor. Then why 7 to 8 billion people? The answer is simple once we hear it. They needed this vast number of humans to gather information to feed the metaverse. And as soon as the metaverse has enough information, then a lot of people will be killed off. And in actuality, you can say that they are already doing this by all these deliberately instigated wars. I think the thing that was being rolled out in 2020 and all the people that have listened to their corrupted government and were getting themselves a sticky the pricky thing, yeah. They eventually also will not, many will fall down. And they are rapidly setting in the programs of starvation. How do they do this? By rising up the food prices. They are deliberately rising up the prices artificially. This is all part of the starvation and depletion and agendas. Yeah. So this whole agenda of starvation is already ongoing, and the prices will go higher and higher the coming years, because if you watch the budget that your so-called government, which is not a government at all, your so-called politicians, your so-called prime minister or president or whatever title this being is under, if you see their policies, if you see their budgets, if you see how many money they want to try to steal from us people, then you only have to count 1 + 1 is 2, because this means that all the food prices will become higher and higher up. The same with utility things, the bills that people need to pay for their utilities will also rise. I am already for 4 years training myself into things, and in actuality, I'm training myself for a possible scenario that it could be that indeed the utilities become almost not to pay anymore, and so then you need to sit in wintertime in cold. So I am already for several years preparing myself, at least 4 years on a row. So so there is a boundary for how many people they need. The rest they don't care for. They also do not want too many non-possessed humans to take part in the final battle, because it can easily get out of control and work in Orion's favor. Then why 7-8 billion people? Well, the answer is simple once we hear it. They needed this vast number of humans to gather information to feed the entire metaverse. The internet, including desktops, laptops, smartphones, iPads, iPods, nano-botted humans and satellites, etc. have all contributed to assembling information on us all to capture our consciousness once we are dedicated to the metaverse. It is my understanding that this is now almost accomplished. And now it is time for population reduction. So how is that going to be done? In the past, world wars took care of it temporarily. So now you get to know the deeper understanding why they instigated world wars. Yeah? So wake the heck up, because this can be part of the coming agendas. In the past, world wars took care of it temporarily, so the population did not increase too fast. But soon enough, after these major wars, the human soul group continued to reproduce quickly. Therefore, wars do not take care of it either. Obviously, wars still fill a function in population culling, but something more drastic needs to be done. Thus came the pandemic. Of course, the entire event was planned and manipulated, and the secret government completely overloaded us with lies and gaslighting. And Wes Penry speaks here about the 2020 plan that was rolled out. But this event was not meant to kill off the population. It was only a precursor for something else: the vaccines. First, we must be scared to death of a global threat that, according to the false narrative, could potentially kill off most of the population. And there was no way to stop it unless the ingenious scientists came up with so-called smaxines, which they did in record speed. Better said, these vaccines were already done and were already awaiting to be rolled out in storehouses in what is that place? Arkansas, because the Clintons have bought up some storehouses where they store all these vaccines and other poisonous things. No time to waste. The agenda must move forward. In the vaccines, they could put whatever they needed to include, such as nanotechnology, DNA mutation technology, and other additives that could target particular individuals with certain types of DNA. These are the ones I suggest who later got sick and died from the shots and still do. The elite wants it to take some time between the shot and the death moment, so no obvious connection can be made between the shot and death. This is also what we are seeing. Other people seem to have very few side effects from the poison. This doesn't mean they are the lucky ones. They are just the ones minutely selected by the overlords to be physically prepared for metaverse. There are apparently certain DNA combinations or something else that is not compatible with what is needed to enter metaverse. This will not kill off enough people. However, and it is not meant to. They still need people of current generations to enter metaverse. The adjustment of numbers of people they want will be accomplished later, as I will explain in a minute. Another thing related to vaccines is infertility and decreased libido in both young and old people. They want us to stop procreating, and this agenda was already being rolled out directly after the Second World War by contaminating the tap water system with nanosilver and with estrogen and other female hormones and other stuff, of course. And later on, they also added nanobots and whatever shit to the tap water. And they are quite successful. On top of that, we have social media that increases narcissism and creates personality modifications. So the entire woke culture also helps the agenda in this sense. It confuses our children about human anatomy, and the generation growing up now will, besides having to take vaccines, etc., be reluctant to have sex and start families. Soon every child will be brain implanted to be fully compatible with metaverse, and via this implant and connected to Musk's satellites, all humans can be remotely manipulated and their hormones tempered with no more sexual desire or desire to build families. And this is already going on. And know that your mobile phone is not a phone at all. It is a weapon, it is a remote controller through which they control and manipulate you. After that, we have the laboratories and uh, um, IVF clinics where they use stem cells to create new life. IVF clinics also there to make sure that people can start family and create new life. Um, i.e. new artificial humans who will be perfectly equipped for metaverse. These will be the cyborgs we have been discussing for so many years. The true cyborgs, because they will be cyborgs from birth, the human 4.0. I would argue that through the laboratories, the elite will determine the number of people they want on the planet. As the older generations die off, the scientists can create new bodies that do not die, and they will make sure they have about 192 million bodies to experiment with, just as planned. And no, um, that this so-called forever living body is artificial body. Yeah, it is not a natural forever living body. The rest of the population will soon be dead and gone anyway. So what happens with the excess 3-unit consciousness whom they do not need in metaverse and the singularity? Well, they will not be recycled, so perhaps they will be kept locked up somewhere in the astral, which is horrific, by the way, if you know what the astral world is. But I do not know. This does not pertain to those who will exit through the grid, but will pertain to those who do not. Some will be glued to the laboratory babies until the quota is filled and the fate of others is unknown. Well, I think eventually if they do not need you anymore, they will make you cease to exist. Perhaps they get eaten, or there are perhaps they get eaten, or their used astral body energy will still feed the metaverse. Thus, humankind, or as many of us as they need, will be connected to the cloud, which is technologically run by a supercomputer, which I was talking about in the Singularity book of 2016. Highly recommended to buy this book yourselves and start reading this book from Wes Penry, all about the singularity. It is the original title is Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Humankind, a Roadmap to the Singularity and Beyond, available on Amazon. There, everybody will be plugged into a hive mind. Our thoughts will be interconnected, so the more decent and compassionate people must mingle with the minds of murderers, rapists, and serial killers. I repeat this again. There, everybody will plugged into a hive mind. Our thoughts will be interconnected, so the more decent and compassionate people must mingle with the minds of murderers, rapists, and serial killers. Think about that. Do you want to have your mind mixed with that? No, I don't. I do not even want to imagine how that would be like. And with this said, I have come to the end of this first part reading of chapter 21, and I close off by saying thank you so much for listening and tapping into this online book reading. And I end with have a joyful day filled with a lot of love, wisdom, revelations, and information that you need to know. As last, let us listen to a short piece of music, Floating Garden from Ben Sound.